Hi, and welcome to another episode of This Week in Plymouth. I am your town manager and your host, Derek Brindisi. This afternoon, we are here to talk about water conservation. And with us today, we have Kendra Martin, our water sewer engineer, and Peter Gordon, our water superintendent. Thanks for being here this afternoon.
Derek, thanks for having us. It's a pleasure to be here.
Sure. So it's only 90 degrees out today. I think yesterday was 100. So this is a perfect time to talk about water conservation.
It is.
And I know just about a month ago, maybe, you were before the select board proposing new water rates for this upcoming season. And during that discussion, a number of our select board members really started to hone in on what are we doing as a community around conserving water, right? Water, I guess we would say, is kind of our most precious resource, right? And so I know there's been a lot of conversations about siting new wells and water booster stations that are going to be built in West Plymouth and looking at, potential well sites in South Plymouth. But today we're talking about the water that we have, right? So what I'd like to talk first about is the water rates, given the conversation we had with the select board. The board approved the recommendation made by the Department of Public Works. And as I understand it, there are 4 tiers for our water rates.
That's correct.
And then we have this infamous summer rate, right? So you want to touch on that, Pete?
Sure. So but the 4 tiers themselves, in addition to the summer rate, are both conservation measures.
Okay.
It's a natural thing that if they find out that they use more water, the price goes up. If they use more, that's going to incentivize them to use less. The summer rate is it's almost a 5th tier. It's for the people who use the most water, and the idea behind it is to incentivize them to use less. Now, especially over these last couple of days where it has been so hot, this is something that we've seen a tremendous amount of. The highest driver of water usage in the summertime is typically irrigation.
Okay.
And when I come to work in the morning, yesterday morning, the day before, and I look at the level of the storage tanks in town, I can see that a lot of people are using irrigation, especially early in the morning. You can see those tank levels are really low.
So you're able to monitor the town's water tank levels.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
And by, hopefully, sending the signal to the consumers with this summer rate, the idea is that they'll use a little bit less water, maybe put in rain sensors on the irrigation system, so pay a little bit more attention to how much they're putting on their lawn. Most people put too much water on their lawn. They really don't need that much.
Sure. Okay. And so, Pete, you mentioned that the tiered structure is built in such a way to encourage water conservation, right? I think that's what I heard. And that the folks that use the highest volume of water are the ones that pay more. So how is that, maybe Kendra, you can touch on, how does that tier structure work where, what happens to me? So if I use a little bit of water, I'm in one area, and if I go over a certain amount of gallonage or something, and I go into a second, is that how that works?
Yeah, that's how it works. So we bill in cubic feet of water.
Okay.
So 1 cubic foot of water is about 7.5 gallons of water. So when people see their bills, they can kind of equate to that. So as you increase your water usage, you move up in the tiers. So tier 1 is what we consider your low users.
Okay.
And then tier 2 is where actually most of our customers lie in on their water usage. And then the higher users get into tiers 3 and 4.
And so the rate actually increases as they move along.
Yes.
So while you're talking, Kendra, what I'm thinking about is the federal tax rate, right? So the more money you make, you go into a higher tax bracket, right? So you're going to pay more in taxes, right? So it sounds to me that this is a similar type of thought process.
Yes, very similar.
When did we start this 4-tier structure?
The 4-tier structure has been in place here for a very long time, I think.
So this isn't anything new.
No, it's not.
So all of our water customers have known this for a very long time. This is something they're accustomed to.
Yep.
And so the summer rate, is that new?
The summer rate is brand new. The summer rate was a product of the rate study that we did early in 2024.
Okay.
The rate study was designed to, set the rates in a way that can sustain the water division in terms of its operating budget, its salaries and wages budget, and of course its 10-year capital plan. In addition, we discussed with the company, the consulting firm that helped us with the rate study, the possibility of instituting the summer rate, which its primary function is conservation.
Okay.
And the idea behind it is the people who use the most water aren't, they're paying their equity in terms of what the amount of what they put on the system in terms of the people who don't use much water don't put a lot of stress on the system. The people who use more water, we want them to, be incentivized to use less and signals to do so through this rate.
Have you, since you enacted this a year ago, have we seen a change in behavior with water conservation because of this new rate?
With 1 year under our belts, it's a little difficult. It's a small sample size to try to determine what the data is.
Okay.
We did generate a little bit of extra revenue, which wasn't really the point. The point is to save water. But I think, with 2 or 3 years under our belt, we'll be able to determine whether or not it's having an impact on usage.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the summer rate was something that was recommended by the Water Conservation Committee. So we took their recommendation and brought that in front of the board as well to enact.
And did the Conservation Committee were they a part of the water rate study as well?
They were not.
So they had their own set of recommendations.
They did, yes.
Gotcha. And I do know the Water Conservation Committee, not to get too off track, they have recommended a water conservation specialist.
Yes.
A paid employee who comes in every day focusing on water conservation. Have you ever had conversations at the Department of Public Works on this one?
Not some at the Department of Public Works, but when I worked with the Conservation Committee, their thought process was that we could take the extra revenue generated through the summer rate and apply that to a person, a new employee whose specific, job description would be conservation-based, activities in terms of either whether it's behind the meter leak detection or whether it is, high-low reads out in the system. If we can, find people who have leaks and help them, fix them. But it takes a lot of work and a lot of data translation to break that down so that we understand what we're looking at. And, we are exploring the possibility of a new initiative for this purpose.
Okay. So let's talk about water conservation. And you mentioned the role an employee could play in water conservation, but what are we doing as the Department of Public Works, Water Division? What are you guys doing specifically to educate our residents on how to preserve water, or conserve water?
So we sent out a pamphlet, was it a year or so ago, with the billing information all about water conservation that was developed in cooperation with the Water Conservation Committee and Plymouth South high school students. So that went in one of the billing cycles to every person on the system. Besides that, we are also, Pete's getting together some kits that people can come to the Water Division and their water conservation kits.
So what would be in these conservation kits?
So we're hoping to put together some kits with some low-flow shower heads, some aerators that will reduce the flow out of the faucets. There'll be toilet dams. There'll be dye tablets that you can put in the tank of your toilet and figure out if the flapper in your toilet's leaking. Things of that nature. Once the kits become available, we'll reach out to Casey and get a message out to the public to let them know that if they'd like to come down to the Water Division and get one of these kits.
And these kits will be free once they're available?
They will be free.
So we're thinking probably sometime in early to mid-July we'd have these kits available?
That sounds very
I know we got to
reasonable.
wait for the new fiscal year to kick in and we get some money in the coffers to buy some stuff.
Yes, sir.
So Casey Kennedy, I think is what you're referring to. She's our communications coordinator. It sounds to me that what you're saying is that once the kits are available, we will then go ahead, we will inform the community that they're available. You can come down to your offices on Camelot Drive and then pick up these free kits.
Yes, sir.
So, but this is to a large degree an educational opportunity. What can we tell our viewers today? What can they do to think about water conservation in their home?
I think the primary thing we can tell them is you can save money by using less water. There's a lot of literature out there about turning off the faucet while you brush your teeth. Not running. There's little shower timers that you can get that will keep you to a 5-minute shower instead of the 15-minute shower. But conservation of water benefits everybody. It benefits everybody in the community. It benefits the environment. And it certainly benefits the aquifer, and it's a finite resource. Everybody thinks that the aquifer beneath Plymouth Carver Kingston will just last forever, and it may not. But the most important thing we can do to make that happen is to protect it. And one of the primary ways we can protect it is to use less water.
So let's talk about the aquifer just a little bit, just so folks understand how our water distribution system, treatment system works. The aquifers, obviously, that's where we get our fresh source of water, right? We've had, I think, a very rainy spring. Now we're headed towards summer. What's your opinion? Do you think our aquifer has been recharged because of this rainy summer? Because it's different. When I worked for the city of Worcester, we had a reservoir. So we had surface water treatment, we had a plant.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy to monitor kind of the levels of the reservoir, right? I think it would be difficult to monitor like the levels of your aquifer. And how does like high heat season or drought season, how does that affect our ability to have enough water?
It's definitely a little bit more complex than looking at a gauge and seeing what the level of your reservoir is.
Sure.
But there are groundwater monitoring wells where you can tell what the level of the groundwater is.
Okay.
Personally, I'm not a hydrogeologist, but the ones I've talked to, most of them believe that there is very little to no aquifer recharge during the summer. All of the aquifer recharge takes place in the spring and in the winter when there's precipitation, particularly snow when it sits on the ground and gradually seeps into the ground, is the best aquifer recharge precipitation that we receive. But this time of year in this weather, generally you see the groundwater levels receding, and that they're not,
They're not going to bounce back.
Well, hopefully they do bounce back, but they're probably not until fall, until we get some
right.
significant precipitation.
Yeah.
Right.
USGS actually has a groundwater monitoring well in Plymouth near the airport.
Okay.
So that information is available to anyone who wants to go on the USGS website and look at that, and it shows the trends and the monitoring levels in that well over the past 20 years. So you can see the trend in how
So
that
that's
is
all
recharging.
publicly available
All
data.
publicly available.
Well, I know. So I've been here 3.5 years now, and during the summer we start communicating because when we start getting into these like drought episodes, right? There's varying levels that we are informing the community on. Can you talk about those levels of drought and what conditions they represent?
Yeah. So the town of Plymouth has what is called a Water Management Act withdrawal permit, and one of the conditions of our permit is we institute seasonal watering restrictions, outdoor watering restrictions.
Right.
And we put those in place from May 30th to September 31st.
Yeah, May 1st to September 30th.
Right.
So those are enacted for that period of time, no matter what happened in the spring.
Right.
Gotcha.
So the permit gives us the opportunity to either do seasonal restrictions, which is what we do. We implement the seasonal restrictions every year. Or we could follow that groundwater monitoring well that Kendra was talking about out at the airport. You watch it. If it gets below a certain level on the ground, a certain benchmark, you have to implement the restrictions. But that gets complex because now sometimes you're on the restrictions, you're off the restrictions, you're back on the restrictions. And we found it a lot easier rather than ride that roller coaster with the residents just to say, hey, we're putting this in place, please follow it. That being said, the state has the Massachusetts Drought Management Task Force.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and anytime they declare, a tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3 drought, there is different levels of restrictions that we can put on.
Got it.
The seasonal outdoor restrictions are kind of a minimum. But if we got into a severe drought, we can tighten down those restrictions in terms of letting people know what types of outdoor watering will be acceptable under those conditions.
And that's what I was, because I remember getting these messages from your shop and saying like, we have to impose these new restrictions because this is, the current conditions we're under. And I think people need to understand, why we're doing this, because again, you can have it sounds like what I'm hearing is you can have a very rainy spring, but that's not going to change these conditions throughout that period of time, right?
Right.
Is that fair to
Yes,
say?
that's correct. And I know it's hard for a lot of people. We get this big downpour of rain, but that doesn't all soak into the ground and recharge the aquifer. A lot of that is just runoff. So you're not getting that recharge that you would see with the inch of rain in 24 hours that people would expect.
Right, and again, so that's what people see. Like, oh, it just rained for the last 2 days. Why can't I water my lawn for the next 3 or 4 days? Why can't I only do it every other day or the odd days, wherever the restriction is? So it's just important for people to understand that we have permits, right? We have to abide by the permits that are issued by state officials, and that's the guidelines that we operate under until we move out of that period of time. So, we got about 10 minutes left. There's a lot of work that is taking place out of the Department of Public Works. I had your boss last week, Bill Coyle, here, and he talked about all the road work that's being done. So I think if we could, because although water work isn't road work, it's going to impact what's happening in people's neighborhoods, right? And so there's going to be disturbances. It sounds like lines are going to be replaced. Do you guys do bypasses, all that stuff on the when you
It depends on the project. Yep.
So let's talk about some of these projects, Kendra. Let's do a recap, if we could, on the White Horse Road, Taylor Ave, Manamint Point Road water project that's taken place the last 2 years?
Yes. So it's wrapping up now. We've finished all the water main work itself. So the water main was replaced on Bartlett Road, Brook Road, Manamint Point Road, White Horse Road, Robbins Hill Road, and a portion of Rocky Hill Road, and Priscilla Beach Road also. So that's just about 5 miles of water main that was replaced under that project, and that was partially funded through a grant through EDA.
How much was that total project?
That total project construction was over $7 million.
Wow.
Yes.
And why did the mains have to be replaced?
So they were all cast iron mains that were installed in the 1930s.
Okay.
So they were at the end of their useful life.
They were.
In addition, some of the mains were undersized, so
Okay.
they was creating hydraulic capacity issues in that zone, in that pressure zone.
Does the department ever do cleaning and lining of mains?
They have not done cleaning of lining since I'm aware of, at least.
Really?
Yes.
Is that not considered a acceptable practice anymore, cleaning and lining?
So it's actually something that I brought up when I first came here, because I had done cleaning and lining in quite a few communities prior to coming here. It's great in the right circumstance.
Sure.
If you have a main that has a history of breaks and it's old, then structurally it's not going to hold up, and you can't clean and line that main.
Cherry Street's not a good
No.
a good one for cleaning
No,
and
it
lining.
is not.
Okay.
That one needs to be replaced entirely.
Right. Because your boss, Bill Coyle, worked for a couple of years for the city of Worcester with cleaning and lining. At least when I worked there, was was one of their big strategies. I would imagine, though, if you did find the right water main, you would consider cleaning and lining. And just so folks at home, what cleaning and lining is, as I remember it, is cleaning out the inside of the main and then lining it with like a cement coating on the inside with a very specific machine.
Yeah, they spray the cement lining inside. And that's when you would see the bypass pipes along the sides of the roads.
Okay.
Because you can't use that water main while you're cleaning and lining it.
Right. But when you're replacing the water main, how do you deliver water?
So what we've done typically is we replace it in a different location.
Gotcha. Right. So you put in and then make the connection. So you have a disturbance with that one day to make the connection.
Yes.
Right? Gotcha. Okay. All right. Good. This is all coming back to me. So we talked about that project down in the Manamint area was a major project, and it's great to see that we're going to be putting the streets back together.
Yes, they're planning to start mill and overlay on the majority of the streets in the beginning of September, and some work on Brook Road in July.
Okay. Because I know a lot of folks are asking what's going on, and they leave my road this way. So it's good to know that the water main project's complete. Everybody has nice, fresh, clean mains.
Yes.
And now we'll be putting the street back together. So that area should be good for at least 10 to 15 years, we're hoping, right?
Yes.
Good. So let's move on. So I think we're about to start a project. Is on Federal Furnace, another water main project?
Yeah, we'll be replacing the water main on Federal Furnace Road. It's about 3 miles worth of main. It's about 16,100 feet. That project will begin the week after 4th of July. Maybe not necessarily on Monday, but on Tuesday, I think they plan to get into the ground. And we plan to notify all the abutters next week prior to the start of the project. We'll get notices out there. This particular project is going to require a shutdown at the beginning of the project to make the connection for the new main. And so hopefully we'll do what we can to get notices out to all those people who will experience that shutdown. And it will only be a few hours, but once that project gets going, we anticipate that it will be, so we'll replace the water main from South Meadow Road to Federal Furnace Elementary School. And we're hoping that the water main itself should be in by, mid-September.
Wow.
And then all they'll have to do is connect the services and side streets, which will probably take another six weeks or so after that. And
And so you're replacing the entire main. What size main is there now, and why are we replacing this main?
it's a 12-inch main.
Okay.
It happens to be a transite or is an asbestos cement main.
Oh,
And
okay.
so as one of the recommendations of our 2019 master plan, they said you better stop planning to get rid of some of this AC main. It's been
Do we
considered.
have a lot of AC pipe in town?
We do.
We do.
We
okay.
do. And so, this area seemed to be a really good place to start. And, we're hopeful that the installation of this 12-inch ductile iron pipe will, it will hopefully improve water quality out in that area as well.
What about the laterals? Are those AC as well?
There are a couple of AC laterals. We can't go into all of the neighborhoods. I think it was at Sheridan Drive over there,
Yes.
and Lee Ave. Some of those do. That was outside the scope of this project, replacing those mains.
Okay.
But someday we'll get to it.
And how is this project funded? And how much was this one? I don't think you mentioned how much.
So this project is about $5.2 million, I think, is the cost of this project.
Wow.
And this is a capital improvement project.
Yep.
So the town will be borrowing to pay for this project, and the water division as an enterprise fund will slowly pay off that borrowing.
So the enterprise fund is going to fully fund this project. So $5 million for this project, and you said, would you say 7, Kendra, for the Merrimack
Yes.
project?
Mm-hmm.
So that's $12 million,
Yep.
which is a significant amount of money
Yep.
when it comes to infrastructure improvements. And again, getting back to roads, $9 million in roads, or $10 million, I think, this year in roads alone. So, to the folks at home, what they see when they wake up in the morning is clean water, right? But they don't really see all the work and the money that it takes to deliver clean water. So really important to know $17 million just in mains the past couple of years. And then there's a future water main that's going to take place. I mentioned it earlier, Cherry Street. Who wants to talk about that project?
Sure. So Cherry Street, we are replacing that water main that I'm sure people can recall a series of breaks that happened over there over the last couple of years. That water main is going to be replaced from Court Street to Industrial Park Road.
Okay.
So a significant portion of that main.
And why is it breaking? I'm sure there's
It's a
lots of reasons.
1930s cast iron main. So it is 70 years old and ready to be replaced. It's at the end of its useful life.
Really? So once it gets that old, we just got to replace it. Are we going to increase the size of this pipe since we're in the ground?
We may upsize this pipe a little bit.
Right.
Some people probably recall we had 3 successive breaks on this main within a very short period of time.
Right.
And so once a main, because not all cast iron water main from the 30s is unreliable. By the time it gets there, it's close enough to its end of useful life that you better start thinking about replacing it. But this main obviously has become unreliable, and so we needed a plan to replace it quickly. And so, we went to town meeting and asked the town meeting members to give us some money to replace that main.
How much again?
That project is about $2.7 million.
I was thinking about $3 million.
Yeah.
So and you said, Kendra, this is currently being designed?
Yes, it's under design right now. They're about 25% design.
25%. So when do you think we'll cut the road open?
So we're hoping to have final design this fall and then
Okay.
go out to bid late winter.
Okay.
So
they're probably
hopefully
spring.
spring.
time. And how long will this main take to replace?
I mean, there's a lot more in the way.
It's a very busy road.
There's a lot more over there on Cherry Street than you have with Federal Furnace Road,
Right.
in terms of underground utilities in particular. So that construction project I can see taking upwards of 6 to 9 months for the water main
Really?
install itself, and then coming back for paving after
Wow,
that.
That's a major project. And speaking of paving, I'm happy you brought that up. So, oftentimes we get phone calls of a water project or a sewer project, and we're cutting the road open, and then maybe prior to that, a few years prior to that, they had just done some resurfacing of that. Are we looking at that? Is that part of our calculation of, let's say, in Cherry Street that we got to be replacing Cherry Street, the roadway anyways, right? Has that gone through its useful life as well, or is that something you'll just patch when you're done?
So we try on every water or sewer project, if we're cutting a main trench in the road, to come in and resurface it at the end.
Okay.
So that, because we're putting a major strain and stress on that road, that as that enterprise fund taking on the cost of that, so it doesn't come out of the roadway budget for the other roads in town.
Gotcha. And I know that typically once we do some resurfacing, we try to have like a moratorium, like for 5 years or
5 years.
something, right? But we want to make sure. I would assume that the road that we're putting a main in, we just didn't resurface like a year ago, right? So I'm sure that's part of your calculation, because I've received phone calls in the past of, geez, they just did this road, 2 years ago. I think we had Winter Street. We had a break on Winter Street.
Yes.
And we had just resurfaced that.
Yes. So we do try that every road that is going to be resurfaced, we will look at the utilities, any information we have on the condition, age of anything that's in there. Unfortunately, we don't always have the best information, which Winter Street was one of those. It was an unknown jacketed water main that we didn't know existed on that road. So,
but if we knew that, we would have replaced the main, then done the resurfacing.
Correct.
Right. So I think that people have to understand that we do the best that we can. Especially, we probably have old gate cards and maybe no gate cards, right, on some of these roads, and so we're kind of missing what's going on these roads. So that's a lot of work, right? So what do we say? $15 million over 3 years just in water mains. I'm sure there's other water project that you guys are working on as well that we're not able to cover here today. But I appreciate you both coming on. Is there anything you want to let the folks know before we break, of whether it's water conservation tips or anything they need to know for some of the water projects moving forward?
Yeah, as I said earlier, once we get the water conservation kits down to the office at 169 Camelot Drive, we'll get the word out to the public so people can come down and grab a free kit. Do everything you can to conserve water. Like I said, it benefits everybody in the system. It benefits the environment. It benefits the aquifer. Have patience with us. With all our projects going on, we'll do everything we can to put the roads back together as well as we can. And remember, we can't always predict where there's going to be a break.
No, you're right. That's true. And even the summer. I mean, typically we'd see more breaks in the winter, but we do see them in the summer as well. P, how can people get in touch with your office when those water kits are ready? What's their phone number?
The phone number at the office is 508-830-4162.
Okay.
And they can talk to anybody in the office, and we should be able to get them connected with a free kit.
Sure, that's great. So again, thank you both for coming on. Appreciate the information. We'll have this aired throughout the summer so folks can learn more about water conservation and the various water construction projects that are going to take place over this summer construction season moving into next year. So any information we talked about today, you can certainly join us on our website at www.plymouth-ma.gov. Until next time, I am your town manager, Derek Medizzi. Thank you so much.